Hey everybody, this is Matt from End Sickness. Today I'm going to be talking about the connection between trauma and chronic illness. Okay, this is something that really means a lot to me because of what I went through with myself, with my daughter, what I've helped other clients overcome. So I'm going to talk about my story, my daughter's healing, the things I went through, what I learned along the way. I'm going to talk about how trauma influences immune response. I'll discuss how safety and perceived danger are so important when you're recovering from a chronic illness, and how to reaffirm these things. I'll talk about how repressed trauma affects the subconscious, how when you have emotions that are unaddressed, how they basically store in your subconscious and then influence your knee-jerk reactions to different things in life. I'll talk about how coping with reminders of the trauma. Okay, so you'll have, for example, things that pop up in your life that remind you of the trauma, different ways that you can cope with this, different things you can do, and what are unhealthy and healthy ways of going ahead and coping with this. So I'll also talk about how the illness starts with emotional conflict. All chronic illnesses start with emotional conflict, you know, and as you can see, we're outside. This wind is doing the best it can with the board, but hey, we're doing the best we can, right? So the last thing I'll talk about is you're forced to address this trauma while you're healing anyways, right? So if you're trying to heal, it's wise to look at these things versus just go ahead and try to ignore them, because you're going to be reminded of them on your healing journey, and unless you address them, then you will more than likely repeat some of the same situations, right? And I'll summarize the end. So before I go any further, I want to talk about, I am not a licensed physician, psychiatrist, medical doctor. This is for informational and educational purposes only. This is based on my own personal experiences. So back to the good stuff. Okay, so my story. I had chronic illness for over 7-8 years before I was able to see any progress at all. I had lost 70-80 pounds, had rashes all over my body, reacting to everything. It was extremely traumatic, you know. Once I started to see some progress, the trauma started to kick in. Once I started to make some progress, and I started to make self-sabotage in different ways, eat the wrong foods, you know, go out and party with my friends, you know, basically stay up late, you know, over-exercise, overdo everything, basically, right? And I didn't realize at the time that I was going to have to address this trauma from back when I was young, and these traumatic events for me to be able to actually feel better overall in the long run. So I just repressed it, and covered it up with consumption of things and in activities, you know, avoidance activities. And I did that for years, you know, until finally my daughter got sick, and I had no choice but to stare the trauma right in the eye and deal with her situation, you know. And when I see her sick, it would, you know, from the mold and paralyzed, basically, and you know, I would be paralyzed completely, you know, and the trauma would completely just make everything worse in my body, you know. And I realized at that moment how I had not overcome a lot of the experiences in my own illness and a lot of the things in my prior life, and I realized that trauma was affecting me still in my day-to-day life, right? Until I started doing the slow, deep breathing, as I'll talk about later, you know, and started to use affirmations, started to go ahead and lean more on faith, other things, you know, it was very difficult to overcome the trauma. So let me talk about how the trauma and the affects the immune response. So first of all, when you have a traumatic event, it makes the brain hypersensitive to other things, because now they're perceiving threats elsewhere. They're trying to protect itself. It's trying to protect itself, right? So the long story short, when you have a traumatic event, whether it's trauma in life, it's emotional trauma, it could be trauma, physical trauma, it could be, you know, surgery, it could be anything, some type of trauma, it affects the immune response, it affects your immune system's reactivity to everything, stress, you know, the foods you eat, what you inhale, all that, right? So people don't understand how much trauma actually affects the immune response, and the immune system is what dictates your symptoms, because it's the one that causes inflammation, because it produces the chemicals that cause inflammation, right? So safety and perceived danger, I want to talk about this. This is critical. To be able to heal, you have to feel safe, and you have to remove the threats in your life, right? Otherwise, if you feel unsafe where you're at or in your situation, or you're still perceiving danger or threats around you, your body, your brain's going to be saying something's still wrong and be sending out signals of inflammation throughout your body, okay? So safety, you have to acquire safety through the recognition of right now realizing that your current symptoms, these situations, they are temporary. You're moving in the right direction. This is all coming to an end soon. A lot of this is just your brain perceiving danger. It is not, in fact, you're real. And when these symptoms pop up, you have to just disregard them and just say, hey, that's my brain perceiving danger. This is not something that is true. and just be indifferent with it and focus on something that brings you joy, or just focus on something that brings you happiness. The main problem is when people look at their symptoms that they experience and then they hyper focus on, oh my God, what can I do to fix this? Let me research about this thing. This is going to be this way forever. Do I have this condition? Blah, 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 right? And by doing that, they hyperfixate it, they over-focus on it, and they feel unsafe, and now they perceive danger in their environment and in their life. And this makes all their symptoms worse, basically, right? So safety and perceived danger are critical, all right? And that is a lot of the foundation to trauma, is not feeling safe and perceiving threats around you, right? So repressed trauma affects the subconscious, okay? If you do not deal with emotions in the moment, they get stored in the subconscious. And then when something in your life reminds you of that, your subconscious will lean you to have a knee-jerk reaction to this event, and it'll be based upon this unaddressed emotion. So for example, you may have had some issue with your father in the past, right? And anytime someone brings up their father and how difficult the relationship was with their father, then it makes you remember how difficult the relationship was with your father, right? And now all of a sudden you've got this feeling, and now you remember all these things, right? But that wasn't in the front of your mind. This is something that was there in your subconscious that got triggered by something someone said, right? So it could be something someone said, something you smell, something you taste, something you hear. It could be anything that makes your brain remember these traumatic events and start to feel these feelings, these reminders, right? So repressed trauma these things don't go away. They just go in the subconscious and you're reminded of them in your life. So coping with reminders of the trauma, okay? What people often do unhealthy is they'll be reminded and then they'll consume something. They'll take a medication, or they'll eat a food, or they'll go overdo something, over-exercise, or they'll go basically avoid this emotion by distracting themselves with TV or something like that, right? So this is an unhealthy way. Wow, that bird's crazy. This is an unhealthy way to be able to deal with stress, okay? We need to be able to have healthy coping mechanisms for these reminders of this trauma. We need to be able to work through it. When you say, okay, I'm not feeling good, I'm gonna go for a walk. Okay, I'm not feeling good, I'm gonna go ahead and do some deep breathing and meditation. I'm not feeling good, okay, I'm gonna put some music on. I'm not feeling good, okay, I'm gonna go shoot some basketball. I'm not feeling good, I'm gonna call someone I love. I'm not feeling good, I'm gonna go ahead and go out in nature and walk on the trails or go to the beach. Whatever it is, you have to have a healthy coping mechanism for this trauma, this stress. Otherwise it gets suppressed and causes you issues, right? So illness starts always with emotional conflict. It isn't some physical thing all the time. It always starts with emotional conflict. This then leads you to make decisions in your physical reality that cause illness, like eating the wrong foods, going to sleep late, prioritizing other people's opinion of you, basically focusing on all these external things and that are trying to provide you satisfaction now because you got this inner conflict. When you got inner conflict, what happens? You look for things outside yourself to feel better, right? Always, okay? So illness always starts with emotional conflict, and it will end with resolving that emotional conflict. If you do not resolve it, you will not fully heal, okay? So you're forced to address trauma while you're going through the healing process. This is something I learned. This is something I've seen in countless others. As soon as they start to feel better, the symptoms are less, the trauma pops up. Why? Because now they can address it in a clean space, a safe space, and they realize that this was a lot of the cause of why they felt this way in the first place. So you can't escape the trauma. You're going to have to address it while you're healing. So you might as well just face it and realize that, okay, let's work on the thing that's easiest to deal with the first, okay? Not the childhood trauma from way back, the thing that happened most recently, okay? And focus on accepting that, moving on from that, etc. This is what I do with clients. It's the neural retraining, going over unresolved emotional conflict, tying that into the recovery. This is why what I do is different. We focus on eliminating the irritants in the diet, in the environment, eliminate the irritants in the thought process as well, right? So this is what I did want to share with everybody. I think it'd be very helpful. If you're open to these concepts, feel free to reach out to me. I do this every day with my clients, and I'm happy to discuss this case, your case in particular, and see how we can help. Thanks for watching, everybody, and hope to see you soon.